Back on Capitol Hill, some of the key figures in our big loss in Afghanistan recently. They're getting their comeuppance, but they're also being protected by Democrats. We're going to go through the highlights in a moment, but first, they are a product of a system, of a culture that is fundamentally warped. The military culture right now, somehow, at the top, to the very top, they produce bureaucrats, not warriors. They may have been warriors somewhere along the way. That went away, and now they are world-class bureaucrats. And when they talk not to inform, but to confuse, to obfuscate, to hide, not to illuminate.
Under investigation now, I'd like to defer that question.
In my opening statement, we can certainly we can break it out and go through it line by line if you'd like.
Make it available to the committee upon request in accordance with appropriate classifications.
Senator, I would defer to the State Department for that assessment. That's a dynamic process.
What I said in my opening statement and the memoranda that I wrote back in the fall of 2020 remained consistent, and I do agree with that.
Okay, people want to be deliberate. They want to be professional. But so much of what we're seeing right now is verbal trickery to avoid responsibility, to carefully pass the buck, but the person you're passing the buck to may not realize it. They're up to something, and it needs to change. They also spend way too much time emphasizing the positive. I mean, that's good when you're playing a football game, but when lives are at stake, I don't think it's good.
They and our commanders exceeded all expectations. On military aircraft alone, we flew more than 387 sorties, averaging nearly 23 per day. And at the height of this operation, an aircraft was taking off every 45 minutes. And not a single sortie was missed for maintenance, fuel, or logistical problems. It was the largest airlift conducted in U.S. history, and it was executed in just 17 days.
What a success, huh? You saw it, I saw it. Was that successful? Was this successful? See how they're spinning it? See how they're saying, oh, we did a great job under these circumstances. Largest, so much hyperbole, so much spin. The people jammed in those airplanes, huh? And what about that talking point that I've been hearing? A sortie, one takeoff every 45 minutes. One takeoff every 40. That does not sound impressive to me. I've been to the airport. I see those planes take off once every 45 seconds. All right. So that's how I feel. You know who was great today? Matt Gaetz, Congressman from Florida.
February 26, 2020, House Armed Services Committee, General Mark Milley. We know we're not going to defeat the Taliban militarily, and they're not going to defeat the government of Afghanistan militarily. You really blew that call, didn't you, General?
I believe that was a issue of strategic stalemate.
You spent more time with Bob Woodward on this book than you spent analyzing the very likely prospect that the Afghanistan government was going to fall immediately to the Taliban, didn't you?
Not even close, Congressman.
Oh, really? Because you said right after Kabul fell that no one could have anticipated the immediate fall of the Ghani government. When did you become aware that Joe Biden tried to get Ghani to lie about the conditions in Afghanistan? He did that in July. Did you know that right away?
I'm not aware of what President Biden...
You're not aware of the phone call that Biden had with Ghani where he said, whether it is true or not, we want you to go out there and paint a rosy picture of what's going on in Afghanistan.
Milley was on that phone call, by the way. He was on that phone call, and it's not been disputed. Joe Biden was trying to get the president of Afghanistan to lie, and General Milley participated in that. And you know what? Matt Gaetz is awesome, totally awesome. Very few people will do what he's doing right now because he hasn't served in the military. He's not afraid to call out a general, and that's great. That's the way the system is supposed to work. This is not a police state. We don't report to those in uniform. They report to us, and that can't be forgotten. More from Matt Gaetz.
Secretary Austin, are you capable of assessing whether another has the will to fight?
No, we're not, and that's the point that the chairman made earlier. So.
That's just like an incredibly disappointing thing for the Secretary of Defense to simply say, I can't assess whether someone has the will to fight. We're not questioning your personal conduct. We're questioning in your official capacity going and undermining the chain of command, which is obviously what you did. You've created this whole chain
not
of
undermine the
communication
chain of
narrative.
command in
Yeah,
any
you
manner,
did.
shape, or form,
You absolutely did. And it
Did not.
Well, you know what? You said yesterday that you weren't going to resign when senators asked you this question. And I believe that you guys probably won't resign. You seem to be very happy failing up over there. But if we didn't have a president that was so addled, you all would be fired.
Damn right. It's a fantastic performance. Some Democrats did a pretty good job as well. I'll get to them in a moment. But first, actually, Ronnie Jackson, who happens to be a veteran of the Navy, also had some great questions and observations.
In just 4 days, 21 districts in 9 provinces fell to the Taliban, and the Afghan security forces quickly surrendered and abandoned their post. This was an obvious beginning to the end of the Afghan army and to the Taliban takeover. General Milley, what were you doing during this time frame? Before you answer that question, let me tell you, I submit to you that perhaps we would not have had 13 service members and hundreds of Afghans killed, 18 service members wounded, and countless U.S. citizens abandoned and left as Taliban hostages if you had been more focused on your duty to this country instead of defending and pandering to the Biden administration's woke social experiment with the United States military, doing book interviews, and colluding with Chinese military officials. You should resign because of your dereliction of duty to this country and your inability to do your job and protect this country. It has become abundantly clear that the American people have completely lost confidence in your ability to do your job. General Milley, will you now resign?
I serve at the pleasure of the President, Mr. Jackson.
I yield back my time.
Great stuff. And you know what? Because so many Republicans are extremely frustrated with General Milley, and General Milley is clearly a Trump hater, he's probably secured himself in this job for as long as he wants it. That's the way the swamp works. Democrats will protect him. Joe Biden will protect him. Hell, he probably has so much on Joe Biden that he could give to an author if he wanted to, and sometimes he seems inclined to. Look, we have a problem with our culture, military culture. And here's one quick fix for the next war, whenever that happens. 20 generals have been in charge over there in Afghanistan in the past 20 years. That is a lot. That's a lot of turnover. That is too much turnover. You can't have that. You got to have 1, 2, 3, maybe. Because with all that turnover, where is the corporate knowledge? There is this tendency when you come into a situation, oh, everything's terrible, and then you fix it, and the next guy comes in, oh, everything is terrible. That's been said before. We were fighting the same war 20 times over. We need a MacArthur. We need an Eisenhower, somebody who starts and sees it through to the end. And there's a way to keep the best generals in the Army. There is. We got to be creative. We got to find a way. We got to find the right people. But this massive turnover, rapid turnover, it's not working. It's not working at all. All right. Now, I mentioned some of the Democrats who did a great job. There's this Congressman Gallego. He's a Democrat from Arizona, and he made a point and got a very good answer, I think, from General McKenzie, acknowledging that generals sometimes are out of the loop. The guys who are supposed to know everything often don't.
Speaking to a lot of service members, enlisted service members that have served for decades in and out of Afghanistan, they were always telling me something extremely different from what I was getting from reports from many of you generals here, that the Afghan army was not ready, that they were not going to be sustainable on their own. And so that, how did we miss that? How is it that a lot of, 18, 19-year-olds, mid-20-year-old E5s were predicting this, but yet some of our greatest minds, both on civilian side and, uniform side, absolutely missed this.
We'll have to take a look at how we actually remain connected to the people who are down at the advisory level. I think that's something that I'm conflicted by that as well. I'll be very candid with you. And we will certainly take a look at that, because I've heard that same strain myself. It's harder to get the truth as you become more senior. We perhaps need to look at ways to ensure that that's conveyed in a more rapid and effective way.
It's been the case probably for centuries. Bad news often doesn't reach the top. Everybody wants to put the best foot forward, and sometimes things are skewed by the time it reaches the generals, and sometimes the generals don't want to hear bad news, and that has an impact. I was in the military myself for 9 years, active duty. I loved it, greatest honor of my life, but that problem, I saw it back then, and I've seen it since. The culture needs to change. I commend General McKenzie for his answer and Congressman Gallego for asking such a great question. All right, now to some of the biggest examples of dishonesty. When General Milley said he's apolitical, and that's really important to him, remaining outside of politics.
You've already established yesterday and today you spent a significant amount of time talking to political book authors and political reporters, including Bob Woodward. What compelled you to do that?
I believe that part of my job is to communicate to the media what we do as a government, what we do as a military to explain to the people. And so I do interviews regularly.
You told the Senate yesterday you hadn't read the book or any of the other political books that have come out, but I don't know how anybody could read the Bob Woodward book. I don't know how you could read it and not be greatly embarrassed about its contents, especially in how it's related to you. Are you embarrassed by the book?
I haven't read the book yet.
Are you embarrassed by the portrayals of the book? No doubt you're aware of them.
Embarrassed, no. I'm concerned that there's mischaracterizations of me becoming very politicized as an individual and that it's my willingness to become politicized, which is not true. I am trying to stay apolitical.
Trying to stay apolitical. Now, I've been watching this guy for a long time. He is a political snake, as swampy as they come. Watch this apolitical general weigh in not long ago on every hot button domestic political issue of our time.
The protests that have ensued not only speak to his killing, but also to the centuries of injustice towards African Americans. We are still struggling with racism, and we have much work to do. And we should all be proud that the vast majority of protests have been peaceful. While the military sets an example for civil society through our inclusiveness, we too have not come far enough. The freedoms guaranteed to us in the Constitution allow people to demand change, just as the peaceful protesters are doing all across the country. Racism and discrimination, structural preferences, patterns of mistreatment, unspoken and unconscious bias have no place in America.
Unconscious bias, what the hell is he talking about? He doesn't know about what he's talking about. He calls those protests last summer peaceful. He is way out of his lane. He is involved in politics big time. He ought to take off that uniform tonight. If he wants, go run for Congress or something, but he does not belong in uniform. Finally, apparently, he has some observations about us. Newsmax, General Milley thinking and writing about Newsmax during all of this.
According to Bob Woodward and from your conversations with him, Nazis and Oath Keepers, but it also included 2 conservative media outlets that you listed in your notebook, including the Epoch Times, which, by the way, is a news outlet that was founded by critics of the Chinese Communist Party, and Newsmax, which is the second most watched conservative media outlet in the country today. Do your notes about January 6th reference both Epoch Times and Newsmax as on a list of domestic terrorists?
It would seem to be the case, according to Bob Woodward. That's pretty wild. That's one hell of a revelation, isn't it? It's in Bob Woodward's book. And by the way, Newsmax, which is obviously not a terrorist organization, I happen to be the highest rated host on Newsmax. I guess he thinks I am a terrorist. I would be offended if it wasn't so laughable, all right? Stay with us. We're going to have more on that with Congressman Banks, more from the book and what Milley said. You'll want to see that. I'll be right back.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.